Hello everyone, welcome to Aardvark Asks. I'm your host Michael Rodbert. With me today is Connor Green, he's our production consultant.
Hello.
Cheers. And we're talking to Neil McPhillips, he's the head of games, specifically in operations at Blazing Griffin. Hello Neil, thank you for joining us today.
Hi guys, thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So if you are interested specifically in what Blazing Griffin do, they are sort of, there's three pillars to them. They do post-production, they do film and TV, and obviously they're a game studio. So if you want to hear more about that, please do listen to the full podcast, which was out just before this one. But yeah, this is more for sort of advice about getting into the industry, a bit about their background and how they can sort of pass on that advice to you. So Neil, tell us a bit more about your role at Blazing Griffin and what a typical day involves for you.
I'm the kind of person that does everything really, anything and everything. Make sure that things keep moving smoothly. So my day is kind of calls, dropping in on different projects, dropping in different teams. HR aspects like mentoring team members as well. Making sure that we've got the kind of equipment and everything we need to keep the studio moving forward. Talking to external partners, business development, all that kind of stuff. So it really is kind of anything and everything. I'm very much a kind of whatever needs to get done kind of person.
Wearing loads of hats, you might say. That's really cool. Yeah. So how did you first become interested in the games industry?
So I guess I started over 20 years ago before games courses were a thing. There's now like some really good games courses out there that are fantastic doorways into the industry. For me, it didn't seem like a realistic possibility of a career, it was that kind of thing. So I actually just kind of stumbled across a job. I mean, I'd always loved games. I'd always been super excited about it from, when we got an Amiga 500 in the house, and that was like a big thing. I used to go around to people's houses and play Commodore 64, and then we got a Mega Drive, and I was like a Sega fan for life at that point. And that was just a recreational thing. And then I actually found out there was a game studio that was near my high school, and they were looking for focus testers to come in and focus test the new Earthworm Jim 64 game that they were working on. So I started going there after school and doing focus testing for them. And then over the course of the next few years, it was like, oh, actually, this is a thing people do. This is an actual job. I could give this a go. So that's kind of when I got my first job in games as a tester.
That's really cool. Do you think it's sort of crucial to have that early exposure to video games as a job and as a career for people?
I don't think so. I think it helps. Passion always helps. I call industries like games and film and TV and music, I call them passion industries, because I don't think you end up in them by mistake. I don't think it was kind of like, oh, I could have gone and worked for Barclays, or I could have gone to work for Activision. I think they require a very specific path towards that. But, we've hired people of all different age groups who have kind of come to it later. I literally just made a hire in the art team of someone who, retrained, basically went back to university at a much older age and following their dreams now. But so I don't think it requires that kind of like get in early, it's got to be something that you really have to push for. But it does. I think it is important that you play games and you care about games. I think you have to have a passion for them to succeed in the industry, to be honest.
So you mentioned, being a massive fan of Sega since those early days. Is there any game that comes to mind that sort of inspired you to follow a career in the industry? When
I realised games could be more than, I guess, games, let's say, it was when I played Shenmue for the Sega Dreamcast. And it was like this first kind of real world narrative experience that I was like, oh wow, like, I loved Outrun. Outrun's one of my favorite games, right? But it's a fairly simplistic arcade game. It's just really fun to play. I was like, Shenmue is fun, but it's exciting and it's narratively deep and it's elevating the genre. That's how I looked at it. And then you start to see other games like Omicron, the Nomad Soul, and the other PC games. I wasn't super into PC. I was playing my Mega Drive for too long, and you start to realize that there's actually like these amazing narrative experiences out there that games can do so much. They can offer so much, and they can touch on so many different areas of entertainment. And that kind of really blew my mind. And I was like, you could do something special here.
That's really interesting to hear that was kind of your eye-opening moment to games and Blazing Griffin's kind of values and stuff that we touched at on the previous podcast.
Yeah, I was literally about to say the same thing. It sounds like, again, another shameless plug, which I also did in the podcast. But if you do want to listen to the full podcast, you'll find out that Blazing Griffin do have a really strong focus on creativity, as well as like sort of, narrative depth and stuff like that. So it sounds like you found the perfect studio for your passions, specifically to do with games. Obviously, like you also said earlier, you've been in the industry now for over 20 years. Would you mind giving like a bit of a whistle-stop talk through your career? What kind of the highlights are, your milestones, that kind of thing?
So like I said, I started out focus testing, and then I became a tester, and I do think it's great to be able to start in a development studio because you get exposure to everything, and generally as well, like development studios, especially smaller independent ones, it's kind of, you can do whatever needs to get done. If someone says like, oh, we need someone to edit these videos, you're like, I'll learn to do that. Okay, cool. And like, we need some help in, production, or we need someone to understand how to use like the Nintendo dev kits. And it's like, all right, cool, I'll do that, and you just kind of start getting like a broad kind of experience over everything. So I was doing all sorts, I was helping with the localization process, I was video editing, I was doing some kind of like basic design and just kind of production and QA and all those kind of things. So then that kind of took me on to some other companies in Scotland and keeping on board with that. And then I did a kind of short stint at Rockstar, which was really interesting, like on GTA 4, which was a lot of fun. Rockstar's a great place to work, and there's some great stuff there, but it was definitely the time where like we were crunching hard to get that game out. That was in the period before I think, the industry was quite as aware of crunch as they are now, and kind of things have been put in place to stop that kind of stuff from happening. So, but it was fun. It was great to be involved in, such a kind of legendary project. And then I moved down to Newcastle to work for Midway, when Midway were still going. There's a lot of, like, in my past, there's a lot of companies that no longer exist. That was a common thing in the games industry at that time, because there weren't middleware tools like Unity that you could cut out years of development. You had to use what you had, and you build up big teams. And if there wasn't a project immediately after, then, they went out of business, and that was kind of normal. And so most of the companies that I work for don't exist anymore, Midway being one of them. And that was really cool. We got to work on a whole bunch of different things, and it was great for me to be working in a company that I had like so much kind of respect for. When I've looked at places to work, I always look at the game that I'll get to work on and the experience that I'll get to have when going there, like that's my first and foremost interest. So going to Midway was a very kind of specific thing. Like I grew up playing Midway games, I loved their arcade games. Mortal Kombat was like a huge thing for me. So moved in there, and we at that point, Midway were doing projects that were like based on, they had like this kind of movie crossover thing going where they were putting real actors in their games, which was like, I think they were at the forefront of that. They did John Woo's Stranglehold with Chow Yun-fat, and we were doing, there was a whole bunch of projects that never made it out, which was a shame, but we were doing Vin Diesel's The Wheelman, which was a hilarious game, but also like a really, really fun game to play, like really, really cool. And then after that, I went to PlayStation, where I kind of started out doing localization management there, like helping kind of all the projects. Like PlayStation do probably more localization than anyone in the industry, to get their games to the widest audience possible. So I was kind of managing a lot of the localization aspects there for huge games like Uncharted and God of War and Heavy Rain and all these different projects that were going on there. And then kind of moved to a different team there, the external development, and I moved kind of over to managing external teams, going out and finding projects that we would produce. So going to events, meeting developers, finding out about their games, and then bringing them in so we could work them, and also working on projects that like PlayStation launched the Vita, for example, and it was like, okay, cool, go and find Vita games, like go and find things that suit this. And we launched the Move. So it was like, okay, cool, go and find like motion control games that can work with this. And we had to go out and find teams to do all that kind of stuff. And that was just like a really fun kind of experience. And then after that, I moved to Channel 4. There was an opportunity came up because I've always had an interest in the kind of cross section between film, TV, and games and narrative, and an opportunity came up at Channel 4 to help start a mobile publishing arm there, which ultimately didn't really pan out because TV industry and games industry I don't think was quite ready for what could be done there. And then Blazing Griffin came along, and at that point I wasn't totally sure whether I would stay in games or not. I was kind of a bit kind of burnt out after the Channel 4 thing, and I was kind of unsure of what was going to go. And then I met Nason, who's the MD here at Blazing Griffin, and it was actually more of a social thing that we met, and he kind of explained the vision for the company, and I just kind of was like, that's it, that's what I want. This is where I want to be, and been here for almost 5 years now, and we've done, and we're on the road to doing a lot of the stuff that we spoke about when we first met, so it's exciting.
So you told us a bit more about your career background from starting. What was your kind of educational background?
It's an interesting one, because I never actually went to university, I mean, apart from the fact that there weren't many games courses back then, I just didn't really know what I would do, and no one in my family went to university. It wasn't kind of a normal thing, and I guess I'd say I'm from a working class family in that sense. Like, my dad was a plumber, and my mum worked in a kind of ticket office at a theatre, and I would never, and I think there's still people now that would never look at themselves and think that they could do the things that I've done. I certainly, in my wildest dreams, never thought that I would be, like, presenting games at E3 and kind of traveling around the world to do this kind of stuff and working for like these companies. And it's important to know that there are opportunities, and it doesn't necessarily need to be through university. I think that there's other routes in, like, I came in through QA, but it wasn't just that I came in through QA. It was that I was doing enough in my own time, and the way I was working, I was showing that I kind of wanted to do more, and I was learning in my own time, and I've always been very passionate about that. And I think I'm more than happy to hire someone here. It doesn't matter if they've been through formal education like that, if they've got a portfolio, or if they can show they have the ability to learn, because you'll come in and you'll learn pretty fast because you have to in a working environment, So I think for me it's important for people to know that there are those other routes in, and it's not just that kind of one path. That's why we at Blazing Griffin always get involved in things like the Kickstart program, that helping people get back in or get into games, finding those opportunities.
No, I think that's so important. And, from my personal experience with games, like, it was something I was quite interested in as a kid. And it's interesting because I never had that exposure or push that it would be a feasible career path. Like, the closest thing we had was like a programming course at school, and I kind of dropped my ambition for it because I didn't see, in your head you see it as this distant, unachievable thing that only happens in America or LA. Obviously that's not the case, and maybe I could have done more research and stuff, but that was never presented to me. Like, that's not so long ago in the grand scheme of things. I left school not that long ago, some time ago, let's say. But even in that relatively short amount of time, from what I hear from talking to people like you, is that there's a lot more exposure to career paths in more creative industries, because that's so important, and it's so important that people get that access and that knowledge that you might not be able to be inspired by elsewhere. So I think it's really good that that's something that you advocate for and really try and push for. So yeah, that's really good. Like you said, you've been there nearly 5 years now, and just in the time there alone, you've sort of worked your way up, and you started as a senior development manager, that's right, yeah. And then you went to head of production all the way to, head of games, specifically operations now. What is it like to sort of be that invested and integral to a studio? And what is it like growing and progressing through just one specific studio?
Yeah, I think, the reason that I've worked for big companies, like PlayStation and Midway and Rockstar and Channel 4, and I would always kind of joke it was like steering the Titanic, like once it's set on a course, like that's it, it's going to happen for better or worse, and you're generally a small cog in those machines, like it can be difficult sometimes. Certainly was for me to kind of accept that you didn't necessarily, you weren't in the position where you could talk to the right person and change something, and Blazing Griffin has been amazing from that perspective for me, because you could talk to anyone. It's a completely flat structure. There's no sense, we have people in those positions, like we have an MD, but he's just in the office. He's just a normal person. You just can walk up, and everyone, I think it's the same for everyone. You can talk to people and you can contribute meaningfully to this company if you want to do it. And I think that's it. If you want to do it, you can do it. And the company values its employees very, very well. We treat people very, very well, and we ask people to do the same to us in return. Like, I give people kind of ultimate leeway to do whatever they need to do as long as they can do their job. And if there's something stopping them from doing their job, then we'll make sure that thing goes away, or that we accommodate it and we work things out. And I think for me, that was the big thing here, is that I was appreciated. The effort I was putting in was appreciated, and it was recognized. And because that's happened to me, I try to do it with all of our staff now. I try to make sure that I'm aware of what everyone's doing, and I try to make sure that people are appreciated for what they're doing and are given opportunities if they want those opportunities. There's really nothing to stop it from happening. So for me to move up through those positions, it was because I wanted to do it. It was because I was grabbing it with both hands, and the company recognized that. I've worked for places, and I'm sure many people work for places where their work can go unappreciated. The effort they put in can go unappreciated, and we generally always do our very best to make sure that doesn't happen here.
Especially for Blazing Griffin, but you see, it's interesting to hear in your career path and time alone, the industry's changed in such a way from, crunch being very prominent to being aware of it, to now a lot of studios that I talk to, like I said, Blazing Griffin included, seem to be a lot more staff orientated and focus on staff well-being, and it's great to hear that that's a company that can offer that. Going back a bit though, as I said, we're talking a bit more about your past. You sort of started in sort of QA roles. What was it like to transition between QA and production? Was that a difficult thing to do? Was it things that you had to do external from just working in QA to then being offered a production role, or was it just as simple as that?
Whenever people ask me about this kind of thing, I always say responsibility, take on responsibility. Production is responsibility. Production is this kind of crucial role to make things happen. That means you take on the responsibility of projects, of budget, of teams. You can do that in QA as well. If you're the person that's taking on a little bit more, that's kind of helping to train the junior people that are coming in, sharing your knowledge, that's creating documentation, that is kind of stepping up and being the conduit to other departments. I used to just go to other departments and be like, hey, I just noticed this, and I was the person that was kind of leading, tell me everything you can about this new version, and tell me what you want me to focus on, tell me what you've changed, so I know what we should be looking for, things like that. I think showing that you can take on responsibility is the main thing, because there's a lot of responsibility in production, and I think if you can make that clear that you've taken that on, you're willing to do it, you can spin many plates, production is spinning a lot of plates, then I think that really matters, and that really helps. And for me, I was lucky to make my start in development studios where I could learn and have access to a lot of that stuff, and I think that's a big thing. And if you don't get it through your work, you should do it in your spare time as well. You should look into those kind of things. You should understand how games are made. You should have a grounding in Unreal or Unity, just enough to know a little bit more,
Yeah, definitely. I think that's some really good advice. That was something I was going to touch upon later, but, I think that's pretty comprehensive and important, that, you take on the responsibility and you do things outside and you just try and do that little bit more. So that's, really, really valuable to people that are listening, I'm sure.
Definitely really useful, I think. I think a lot of people who I've talked to from QA struggle to jump into the production role, but I think just taking that responsibility and doing everything you can to get to grips with what a production role is all about is a great first step, and some great advice to offer. Production
it's not like some other disciplines. It's not about learning I'm a master of Jira, I'm a master of Handsofts, that means I can move into production, because that's actually a very small and very learnable part of your work. What matters is that you understand the work that people are doing, and you understand how to talk to people, and you understand your responsibility within the team, and that you can just unblock things to get things moving. I always think that soft skills are far more important in production, because you're going to be dealing with all these different personalities and all these different disciplines and all these different people, and it can be really difficult if you're you're not capable of that, you know?
What are some of those skills that you'd say are important to getting into production based? Obviously, you mentioned like some soft skills and responsibility being the biggest pillar of those. Is there any more that you could tell us that might help someone get into production?
I think a lot of communication is involved in production, like an absolute ton. Like especially now, I'd say now more than ever, with the more studios being virtual, you have to jump on video calls constantly. You know, you have to be messaging people constantly. You have to be kind of in communication constantly and kind of share information very well, you know, so that ability to both read, write and speak in a way that can be understood and kind of grasped by everyone around you is really important, you know. Talking to a programmer can be different to talking to an artist, and how you handle those people can be very different. And I think there's, you know, as we say, we're very person focused. So we do try to accommodate people as much as possible. And that means that it's not always a single approach for everyone. So I look to production to be able to kind of balance that in the way they communicate with people, you know. So communication, super important. Let's say like responsibility, super important. Multitasking, incredibly important. You're going to be spinning so many different plates in production. And problem solving, and that's not just for production, that's for everyone, but problem solving, because in all my projects that I've worked on, no two have ever been the same, you know, ever. You're solving new problems that no one's ever come up against every day because you're choosing to create something new all the time. So it is just like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this within the time we have? How are we going to make this tool do this? You know, how are we going to convey this story, and how are we going to record this? All these kind of things, like it's problem solving, and a good producer can listen to what other people are saying and help them solve that problem, you know.
Obviously, you've learned this over, you know, a quite expansive career, like over 20 years, and like you said, you've worked for Rockstar and Blazing Griffin now and Channel 4 and stuff. Stripping all that back then, if you go back to the very beginning, what's one thing you know now that you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
There's two things. I think one, you learn by doing. A lot of people put a lot of emphasis on experience with, you know, software or tools that they've done, but it's more for me, it's the ability to learn. And I think that's a really important thing for me. And again, like why we interview people the way we do in a very kind of casual, informal way is to kind of get an understanding of whether or not you've got these skills. That's fantastic. You're the best person at this, but what can you learn to do, and are you capable of learning more? And I think that's a big thing, because I'm going to drop you into this project, and the important thing is that you're going to be able to adapt and learn. And I think you do that by doing. You know, I think people learn more in their first kind of 6 months of working than they do in all the kind of education that ever came before, because they're on a project they've got to deliver. And the other one is that ultimately, like, you look at people around you and you put people on, especially in, I see it a lot in younger people, and I was the same, you put people on a pedestal and you think they know what they're doing. But I can tell you the honest truth is you never know what you're doing. You're always making stuff up on the spot, and you're always solving problems, and it comes down to your ability to solve those problems, you know, and you live and learn, and that's just it. You live and learn.
I think that advice is obviously specific to video games, but I think that's true for every element of life. I think it's good words to live by. So we took you back to the very beginning of your career. Let's go completely out of the career and a bit of a sidestep. If you weren't working in your role right now, what would you be doing if you didn't get into the industry, or what would you be doing similarly if you weren't in this role and maybe at a different studio perhaps?
I would probably be in counselling. I'd be a counsellor, not in counselling. And again, something that I think serves me very well, I'm a qualified counsellor in Scotland only, so I probably can't help you guys. But I'm a qualified counsellor. It's something that I did in my own time. I kind of studied in my own time and got qualified. I enjoy it. I like helping people. But also I find that the skills that I learned there to be incredibly important in running a team. I think they've really helped me. Counselling is what they call a listening skill, and listening to people is incredibly important, and it's something that I put into practice, and when I manage people and when I kind of run my team. And I would probably be just pursuing that as a career if I wasn't here right now, because I think it's incredibly rewarding.
No, I can imagine it is, and I think it's great that you've sort of took that on in your free time to do that. And like you said, it's kind of benefit. Not only is it a beneficial skill for yourself and people that you implement that in. But it's nice that that's also benefited you in your career as well.
In a very similar way, when I did psychology at uni, that's kind of what I wanted to do, with help people and talk to people, and I guess that's kind of how I landed into recruitment as well, because it was going to be that or going to counselling. So that's kind of the same kind of path.
That's cool.
So.
Yeah. So looking back on your career, then, what is your highlight? What's your career highlight?
There's a lot. I think everyone that gets to work in games and gets to do these things, like, the first time you go to E3 and these kind of things are always super exciting, and getting to kind of experience that stuff. But honestly, it's the first time you see your game box in a shop. That's a harder thing to do these days. Not many games coming out on disc. That's always exciting. But I think, for me, it's getting a project out and pulling stuff together. Like, I worked on a small game on PS3 when I was at PlayStation called When Vikings Attack, which was this really, really fun multiplayer game. It was kind of like, it had that kind of like Bomberman vibe of like really simple, quick kind of games, and we made it for PS3 and for Vita, and we did all this kind of crossplay. We were one of the first teams to do like crossplay across the two, and it was like super successful in Japan. Like, we were getting like fan art in Japan, and like Shuhei and Ueda-san and all these people from like Japan like were playing it on videos and stuff out there, and it was a really cool thing to like take basically like a 4-man team in Manchester, these guys Clever Beans, a super talented team, and help them kind of realize that project and get it released. And it wasn't like a huge smash success, but everyone that played it, I think, really liked it, and it kind of got a cult following. We almost made like an official World Cup tie-in in South America, because they like loved it in Sony Latin America. They were like, can you do a version in like a football stadium? And we actually got it into the Red Bull 5G, which is like an esport tournament in Japan. It was an event there for a couple of years as well and stuff like that, where it was called Viking Poi Poi. And it's just, it was cool to take something like that and just kind of use the tools of PlayStation with its global reach to kind of get it out. So this game that I think now would probably struggle, we were able to take it and put it onto these platforms and put it into the hands of people all around the world. And that was really cool, and it was really satisfying to kind of help a team do that, I think
it's interesting as well that it like you just said, like, it's cool that it's like almost like a happy coincidence and being at the right place at the right time that this took off as massive as it did, like with, not only in Japan, but, South America and stuff. And I think those are sometimes the best kind of successes, where it's just completely blown any expectation out of the water, and then just to see something that though you might be proud of, like on your own, to see people accept it so widely, I bet it's a fantastic feeling.
It was the first game that I'd worked on where we got fan art. It was like really funny to see that. It was like, okay, people like this. You've put something out in the world that has given someone enough joy that they've actually gone and done that, and I think that's really fun.
That's really cool, yeah. But yeah, that's some really good stuff there, Neil. Some really important stuff you've touched on for both advice and as well some interesting insights that you've given into your background. So thank you very much for joining us today.
Cool. No, thanks for having me. It's been really fun.
So again, if you are interested in working with people like Neil, then the roles at Blazing Griffin are on our website, or again, you can contact Connor or anyone else depending on your speciality. But until next time, I've been your host, Mark Arubba, with of course Neil McPhillips from Blazing Griffin and Connor Green, our production consultant. Cheers. Thank you.
Thanks, folks.